guys, and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about a few of the common issues that you may experience with your Y62, and also if you are looking for a Y62, some of the issues that you may need to be aware of, just so you have that knowledge when you go to apply a new Y62. Sorry about any of the background noise that you may hear. A lot of construction going on in the area, a lot of new houses getting built. So no doubt there'll be a lot of people going past, a lot of sort of construction noises that you may hear. Sorry about that, not a lot I can do. Also, sorry I haven't been putting out many videos. I've been pretty flat out recently and just haven't had the time, unfortunately, to get some videos out that I've really wanted to do. So I just moved down not that long ago from Townsville down to Victoria, where I grew up, and I am absolutely loving it. It's so much better down here, seasonal weather, and everything is just so much better, in my opinion. It was 9 degrees this morning and it's still cold, so long pants and jumper for me today. So first of all, let's start off with, I suppose, the most serious issue that you will come across with the Y62. And that is, unfortunately, the transmission. So the transmission in the Y62 is a bit of an issue, and I think it's sort of something that a lot of people will experience. And it's sort of pretty prevalent in just about every Y62. A lot of Y62 owners that I've spoken about have had this issue to some degree. It's sort of all, a bit dependent, but a majority of people will have the same sort of symptoms in their transmission. So a little bit of history from my research and experience: the transmission in the Y62 is the same as what is in the 370Z. Pretty sure it's a 370, might be the 350, they might share the same thing, but it is fundamentally the same transmission. Now, of course, there'll be a few changes and things to adapt it to work in a Y62. However, the transmission is very much the same thing. Now, for those who don't know, the 350 and 370Z, they're a bit of a sports coupe that Nissan made, a bit of a grand touring sort of car. It doesn't have a heap of power. So it's, not so much of an issue in those cars. However, that's what the transmission was designed for. So when you step up into a Y62 that is, 3 tons and makes more power, issues in the transmission start to be a bit of a drama. I don't know why they just didn't make a new transmission for the Y62 or adapt one that was a bit stronger. It would have alleviated all these sort of issues from the beginning. Obviously, cost-saving measures and the reduction in tooling and all that sort of stuff that's needed to make a whole new thing is obviously a big factor. Anyway, we have what we have, and it is what it is. So some issues that you may face are some slipping through gear changes, some torque converter issues, some flaring. These sort of things may become quite prevalent in your Y62. So I know me in particular, I do have some flaring between the 3rd to 4th gear change. A lot of people have experienced similar things through 2nd to 3rd, but that 2nd to 3rd, 3rd to 4th sort of area is typically where it happens. It's not something that happens all the time. It typically is pretty good for a period of time, and then it'll come back for a little bit, then it'll go away, and it's all very just strange and annoying, but it just is what it is. It's fairly normal. A lot of people will go to Nissan with these faults, and sure enough, they will confirm them, and they'll get a new transmission. The transmission will be replaced, and it'll eventually sort of just come back. There's a couple of reasons for it. Like I sort of mentioned, the transmissions aren't really strong enough or designed well enough for the Y62. So these transmissions that I'm talking about, it's an there'll be an RE7. So Nissan's sort of model numbers are quite sort of easy to understand. There's RE4, RE5, RE7, and basically is just indicating how many gears a transmission has. So RE7, I'm pretty sure is what it is, meaning, 7 gears. Now it's rated for, I think it's just over 300 kilowatts or something, and a certain amount of newton meters. I can't remember off the top of my head. However, it is pretty much right at its limits just with a stock Y62. And you factor in all that weight and towing and all that sort of thing, and these issues will start to come up. Now, it's not sort of, you know, strictly limited to a certain manufactured date or anything like that. It's sort of just all across the board. Everyone sort of has these issues. It's not everyone, you know, some people have better luck than others. However, it is pretty common. Now, is it a big deal? No, not really. It just sort of is what it is. So the flaring between gears, I always drive in manual mode, so a lot of the sort of issues that people have are sort of negated by the fact that I'm changing the gears and it's not up to the transmission. Because being up in the higher RPM, I seem to have a bit more luck with not having them issues. Whereas if you're going a bit slower and you're not changing gears higher up in that RPM range, is typically when I will notice these things happening. So I think that is also a bit of a help as well. So the flaring, it's almost like it changes gears and then it gets to a point halfway through where nothing really happens. And it's almost like the car's in neutral, where it will rev and then it'll go into gear, and it's sort of a bit of a clunky sort of sound and feeling through the vehicle. It's not a good thing, but I mean, it's also, you know, there's a lot of torque converter issues as well, where cars at a speed will be sort of fluctuating through the RPM a little bit. You know, it's more pronounced in other cars than what it is in some, and then, you know, even at idle it'll be doing it as well. And typically a torque converter replacement will fix that. It was sort of a bit common there, sort of towards the mid to end of last year. Must have been a bad batch of them in particular. So these sort of things happen, not the end of the world, doesn't really affect anything too much. However, obviously not that great either. So there's a couple of little factors here that you can do to sort of limit it as much as you can. And heat is sort of the biggest one that will kill an automatic transmission, or at least create these issues. So obviously the fluid inside the transmission, you know, when it starts to heat up, it sort of starts to lose that viscosity a little bit. So it's not as thick as what it would typically be when it's cold. So the thicker it is, the sort of higher the pressure is within the transmission during its shifts. So it's more likely to shift a lot smoother than what it is when it is hot. So keeping the transmission temperatures down will help a little bit with that shifting, just due to how the valve body is sort of set up. So adding an external transcooler and a deeper pan for more of that volume of the transmission fluid can also be a good help in reducing that heat. Obviously a deeper pan, more volume of fluid, easily able to dissipate that heat through the higher volume of fluid. So it helps to reduce them trans temperatures, as well as the external transmission cooler, which of course aids in obviously more cool air on that transmission cooler, helping to keep the transmission temps down. A couple of ways there that you can sort of mitigate these things from happening, and of course in turn prolong the life of the transmission. And of course doing regular transmission services is very important too. They sort of recommend around that 40,000 K mark for normal driving, but I'd probably be looking at the 25,000 K mark if you're towing, and probably 30,000 if you are just doing normal driving, just to keep that transmission fluid fresh and make sure that you know, that viscosity is sort of maintained, because after time the oil will start to degrade. This is the nature of fluids. So what would be the solution to actually fixing these problems full stop? Well, a couple of good examples would be some heavier duty clutch packs, or the addition of more clutch packs throughout the transmission. This will help with better shifting and allowing for more power to go through the transmission. Another good idea would be a valve body upgrade, increasing the shift pressures and the line pressures and all this sort of thing that goes into it, allowing the transmission to better manage itself and shift gears a lot nicer than what it currently does. Now these things don't really exist within Australia. I think there is a few companies in America that are doing these things. However, it's not really very common to do in Australia. My knowledge and experience of cars is very much performance based. Owning XR6 turbos in the past, I'm very up to date with things that you do for that. Like if I went and bought another XR6 turbo, which hopefully might happen in the future, I'd know straight away what I need to do to it to make it a strong, reliable, fast car. Whereas with the Y62s, I know what to do, but the off-the-shelf stuff isn't available to do it. It's just not really a thing here in Australia. I think there is a transmission company, it might be Wholesale Automatics, that is looking into doing a valve body upgrade, which would be great for these. But obviously it takes time and development and all the rest of it into making something like that happen. And at this stage, there's just nothing really available. Especially for those people who have got, you know, turbos and superchargers on their Y62s. Something to think about, because again, the transmissions are pretty close to being at their limit just from the factory. So when you start to go over that, these sort of issues will become a lot more prevalent in them cars, and in fact it certainly is. A lot of people do complain about, oh, you know, I've just put a supercharger on and now all of a sudden I'm having dramas with my transmission. Now moving on to trailer plug wiring. This is a massive one that you'll see every single day pretty much on the Facebook pages. People having issues with their trailer plug. So it'll be someone, oh, you know, I've been towing my caravan and all of a sudden I've had all these warning lights come up on the dash and the car isn't running right, and you know, I can't get full power out of it and it's not revving out and all this. It's just down to the trailer plug. 99% of the time, it is literally just the trailer plug. So if you are actually towing something, and that does happen to you, you say you might not have full power, the car's sluggish, you've got warning lights on the dash, the car won't rev out very far in the RPM range, these sort of things, it is typically down to the trailer plug. So what typically will happen is there'll be some sort of a resistance issue between whatever it is you're towing and the car. And because these cars are so finicky when it comes to their electronics, they'll chuck a hissy fit and they'll basically put the car into this sort of limp mode where it won't function properly, or at the very least it'll throw a heap of codes or warning lights on the dash. So a pretty easy way around it, disconnecting the trailer plug is the first step, turning the car off, giving it a moment. In that time you can disconnect the battery if you would like. It'll most likely clear all those warning lights from the dash, and then start the car up and you should be right to go. The car should then act as normal, because obviously that resistance issue is no longer there, so there is, you know, the car isn't sensing that there's a problem, so it's happy to continue on. Obviously a bit of an issue when you need lights and turn signals and all these sort of things on whatever it is you're towing. So yeah, it makes it a bit of a drama. There's a couple of ways that you can combat that. Making sure that the female and male pins of your trailer plug are obviously corrosion free, and making sure that there's no moisture or water getting into any of those parts. So carrying a spray can of contact cleaner with you when you're going away is an awesome idea. This will just make sure that if you do come across any of these issues, you can spray both ends, and hopefully that might sort things out for you. And also an OBD2 code reader. It's also very important, something that can clear codes and, you know, get you on your way to wherever it is that you're going. And, you know, if you do need some external support, hopefully getting to Nissan. Saves you the embarrassment of putting the Y62 on a tow truck just because the trailer plug has let it down. So again, pretty common issue. I actually ran into this issue a couple of months ago when I was on a bucks trip. I was towing my mate's boat, and it was okay for the first day. Second day it was all right. However, on the way home, we were getting some dash lights come up. I was like, oh, okay, a bit strange. However, I'm pretty confident I know what that is. And under load, it was very jerky, wouldn't give me a smooth linear power curve that it typically would. It was very much like it had this huge lumpy cam in it, and it just would not accelerate up hills. But after, you know, 5, 10, 15 minutes of driving, it came good and went away, apart from the dash light still being on. It can happen to anyone, so just be mindful. And I mean, my trailer plug was clean. I just put it down to a bit of water getting into the trailer lights or into that wiring system and creating some resistance and giving us some issues. And then sort of once it started, it just sort of continued to happen. As soon as the boat trailer went in the water, it was just, yeah, was what it was. However, again, didn't affect the car except for just, you know, under load, but it eventually went away and behave normally. Those couple of things will help you out in a pinch. Next thing we're going to talk about, which isn't something that probably a lot of people are aware of, however does get mentioned quite often, and that is with lifts. If your car isn't like mine and weighs as much as mine and doesn't have the bar work and stuff on it that mine does, and you've got a fairly stock Y62, you do not need this massive spring rate in the front of the vehicle. So in the front of mine, I'm pretty sure it's 200 kilo constants in the front and then 300s in the rear. Now I've obviously got a lot of weight in my car. It's 3.4 tons with me in it and a full tank of fuel, so it's quite heavy. The axle balance is quite good and we're all within parameters there. Obviously that gross combination mass is obviously affected, of course. And the vehicle mass of the car is obviously pretty much on its limit. So whilst the rear of the car isn't the concern, the front of the car is. Now I've got the Razzler bar on there, snorkel's there, but it's not really over the front axle group. We've got the recovery points and the light bar in the bull bar. But apart from that, there's not really a heap of weight over the front end. The bar probably weighs 65 kilos, 70 kilos, something around there. So there's not really a heap of weight there at the moment. However, I went a bit heavier on my front so I could accommodate a winch. A winch is probably around the 20 kilo mark, depending on what you get. So having a decent amount on the front for me was important. Especially with my sort of driving style and how I like to use my car. However, this comes with its own problem. The whole suspension geometry, because of the stiffer springs, is now changed. So instead of being stock and our CVs being on a little bit of an angle, the angle is now increased because it now has heavier springs and there's not so much compression on that spring to lower the CVs down to something more of a neutral position. Now this then in turn means that the rubber boots on the CVs are now rubbing. Not so bad on the passenger side, they're nearly touching, but they just don't. However, on the driver's side CV, the boot is actually rubbing. Now it's on these smaller ribs down towards the actual wheel itself. The two are rubbing together and obviously as it spins around, creating that friction. This will eventually wear through and I'll have to replace the boot on it. Now, something to keep in mind if you are going to be lifting your car is make sure you get the correct spring rates for what it is that you are doing and what's on the car. Because eventually it'll, like I said, wear through and it'll need to be replaced. And you don't really get a warning when that happens, apart from a huge amount of grease and crap all up in your wheel well. Now, if you are somewhere remote, that is a bit of an issue. It's not something that can sort of just be easily fixed without actually putting a whole new boot on and resealing it all with grease. Make sure that you don't become in that situation where you ruin a CV just because you put the wrong lift in. So just be very mindful of that. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about doesn't really pertain to a lot of us, apart from those people who bought a Y62 after 2023 with the new Directed Technologies infotainment system. Now, I've banged on a lot about that because, it's something new and it's actually good, and whilst we lost a few features, they can still be integrated into the system now. Like I mentioned sort of at the beginning, I knew someone would come up with a camera solution to reintegrate that 360-degree camera, and sure enough, somebody did. Stole my idea, no doubt. However, because it's sort of a new thing and it's in a car and it's all just a bit difficult and all the rest of it, some people have had a few issues with their infotainment systems. It's a pretty popular thing, and something that you need to be aware of is the fact that sometimes when reversing, the screen will go blank, you won't get your reverse camera coming up, there'll be some freezing issues, some issues with audio not working properly, with phones not connecting. Just annoying things that will happen from time to time for some people affected by these new infotainment systems. Now, Nissan of course have replaced them when people have complained. However, a good starting point to troubleshoot these issues is to just do an over-the-air update. So what that involves is going into your infotainment system, connecting it to your internet and doing a firmware update. For a lot of people, that has sorted these issues out, but of course it's not going to fix it for everyone, so it's a good place to start at least. There's a few teething issues, but I do say in years to come it'll sort of all be smoothed out, and hopefully they just work as intended, because I really enjoyed the layout, the functionality, the integration between the car and it, and how it sort of all looks and is laid out, and how the maps and all that work. So I really do like it, but of course, you know, few issues along the way. So just be mindful of that, and do know that if it does happen, just try the over-the-air update first, but if it doesn't fix it, obviously go back to Nissan. So now moving on to the TPMS. The TPMS, the tyre pressure monitoring system, is a great thing that allows you to know what your tyre pressures are at, and it is pretty accurate too in the patrol. However, from time to time, some people will have issues with them. If you do have the flat tyre warning light come up on the dash, do go into the app section there where it will tell you what your tyre pressures are. And if at one corner it has an X through the actual readout, then it is most likely due to the fact that the tyre pressure monitoring unit in that tyre isn't working correctly. Obviously get out and double check, however, it is most likely what the cause is. So I had that come up a couple of times, every now and again, when I got these wheels and tyres fitted up for the first time. Now what had happened was the tyre installer didn't actually fit the TPMS sensors in correctly. So they were sort of not really getting a good reading. So yes, if you are having some issues with your TPMS, just go back to where you had the tyres fitted and get them to sort that out. So obviously mine wasn't connected properly, so it wasn't doing what it was supposed to be doing. And also they're very easy to break apparently. So both times that I've had tyres changed over on the patrol, they've actually broken the TPMS, which of course makes it a bit of an issue when it comes to actually getting a proper reading. So your tyre shop will replace it, and you'll be good to go. Now wheel alignments. Wheel alignments are crucial on these things for maximising your tyre life, and the Y62 can be a bit notorious for being difficult to wheel align. Being sort of a different sort of suspension setup and being independent front and rear can be a little bit challenging for those people who are a bit inexperienced with the Y62. So if you are going to get a wheel alignment, make sure that it is done by someone who knows what they are doing, who has had plenty of experience wheel aligning the Y62, and having proven results as well. Obviously they're quite heavy, and obviously with that HBMC, it's all a bit challenging and can take some time to get right. Especially when they're lifted, it makes it apparently quite a lot more difficult, so something to keep in mind as well. But a good tip is zero toe in the rear and you'll be right to go. After my lift, I did have issues getting my wheel alignment right. The place that I took it to in Townsville, who typically deal with heavy vehicles but have done Y62s in the past, they didn't get it right the first time. Under acceleration, obviously the car squats down a little bit, and that again changes the suspension geometry, which will make the car, in my case, felt as though it was slipping into the left under acceleration and then slipping over to the right as you come off the accelerator. And it was very sort of, not hard to control, but it was just like, whoa, okay, this is really strange when you were driving on the road. But the second time, they had the car for the whole day and they got it 100% perfect. And the wheel alignment hasn't moved since then, and the tyre wear has been quite good with the abuse that my tyres do get. So I was pretty happy with that, but again, make sure you get someone who knows what they're doing. Another issue that'll come up from time to time is to do with the brake switch. So obviously the brake switch is a little switch that sits behind the brake pedal, and when you brake, it will activate the brake lights. And obviously being a push button start, you need to have your foot on the brake for the car to start. And if the car doesn't sense that the brake lights are on when you go to start the car, then the car won't start. So sometimes these little brake switches will fail and the car won't be able to start. Now there's a way around that. If you do have a brake controller installed, you can use your brake controller to actually sort of activate those brake lights, and it'll trick the car into starting. So sort of handy if you have a brake controller, but if you don't, you're sort of screwed. It's a very simple, easy thing to swap out. I've done it on previous cars before, not on the Y62, but there's just a cheap little part to have in the car in the case that that does happen. It's not really dependent on a year or make of, or like a month model of when the car was built, nor does it matter about Ks. It can happen at any time, and it's just a nice little thing to carry just in case you do ever run into that issue. And the last sort of big thing that we're going to talk about is the Viscous fan hubs. The Viscous fan hub, how good. Now, that was a pretty common issue sort of at the end of last year. It seemed that the majority of people who had just picked up their Y62s had issues with the Viscous fan hub. Now, it seemed to really affect a certain month and year of the Y62, and yeah, it was pretty prevalent. A lot of people were having that issue. So what would happen was the fan hub would basically lock on and it would be engaged pretty much as soon as you started the car until you turned it off. Some people had also experienced some power loss when it was happening, which obviously is a bit of an issue when you're towing and a bit of a safety risk. So obviously getting it back into Nissan and getting it replaced is the best answer for that one. Nissan did like to just do a software update, which I don't know, apparently worked for some people, but I can't see it really being the cause for this sort of issue. I think it's definitely down to the actual hub itself being the problem. And a good way to check if your Viscous fan hub is on the way out is if you get in there and open the bonnet and locate the fan hub, which will be on the front of the engine just behind where the radiator is, give it a spin. If it doesn't want to spin, then you're good to go. But if it does spin freely, then it is on its way out and you need a new one. You'll obviously notice it as well if it starts to get a bit hot and if the fan comes on and the car doesn't really cool down very well, that's another good sign as well. Or if it just doesn't come on at all. Now obviously the way that that hub works, there's a hydraulic fluid in it, and obviously when the ECU detects that, oh yes, the car's getting a bit warm, we need to cool, or if it's got low airspeed through the radiator, that fan will come on and it'll help to cool the car down. Very simple design, bit of an old sort of design, however, works very well. So do be mindful of that. Not so much of an issue now, not so much of an issue on older cars as well. I've never really had any issues with it. Occasionally it'll turn on randomly sometimes in the morning and then it'll turn itself off. Or if it's a very hot day and I've started the car and I've put the aircon on max, then it will turn on but then quickly turn off. If you're having issues like that, don't worry about it. That's not what we're actually talking about here. If it's staying on continuously, then that is the problem. So just be mindful of those things. So these are sort of the main issues that you'll find with Y62s. Of course, there is more sort of niggling little things here and there that aren't so common but do definitely happen, and some other things to look out for as well. However, they are a pretty reliable car and they don't really have many issues, particularly with the engine, which is sort of the most important part of the car. The VK56 is quite reliable and the rest of the car is pretty good too. However, if you are new to buying a Y62 and you haven't picked one up yet, it's good to also do a bit more research than just watching this video to find out a few more other little niggling things that may occur for you. However, of course, with so many Y62s being on the road now, a lot more issues will sort of come up, and it just sort of is the nature of having so many cars on the road that, you know, more and more will start to have issues because of their popularity. If you've got any other issues or little things that you think are important to bring up where I haven't mentioned them in this video, some things that you might have experienced that have been a pain in the backside, please do let me know. I'd be interested to know what you have experienced with your Y62. But as always guys, make sure you like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you all at the next video.